Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Nigeria is currently enmeshed in a series of diplomatic standoffs with Ghana and South Africa over the alleged ill treatment of its citizens. In the Southern African country, for instance, Nigeria has had her fair share of victims of the occasional xenophobic attacks, which many have called a manifestation of the socioeconomic pressures of the post-apartheid system. However, more to concern Nigerians at home has been the indignity that their fellow citizens are regularly being subjected to the authorities in that country. And the federal government doing enough to protect is the federal government doing enough to protect Nigerians living in other countries? To throw more light on this and to have a conversation is Dr. Austin Tam-George, a researcher and consultant who taught at the University of Cape Town in South Africa and teaches at the Pan-African University here in Lagos. Dr. Tam-George was also a consultant to the new Partnership for Africa Development with a brief to monitor its good governance policy. Once again, Dr. Tam, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning.
Yeah, morning.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
I wanted to start, you heard the introduction. I'm sure you've been following a lot of the, I mean, this is not something that happened yesterday. This is something that has been happening for quite a long time. There are always flare-ups and also sort of peters out. But the xenophobic attacks in South Africa, they have been consistent not just to Nigerians, but to other parts of other Africans living in South Africa. I wanted to get from you, since you did live in South Africa, first of all, contextualize what does it mean? If I'm watching this, and I've heard xenophobic attacks for a long time, what does this mean? And what's happening to citizens that are not South Africans in South Africa, before we touch on Ghana?
Yeah, well, I lived in South Africa. I schooled in South Africa. I did my PhD there. Eventually, I left the University of the Witwatersrand, where I did the PhD, and moved to University of Cape Town, where I was Andrew W. Mellon postdoctoral fellow, and then I taught in the university eventually. Throughout my years in South Africa, I wasn't personally discriminated against.
What years were these? When were you there?
From 2003 up to 2009.
Okay.
I didn't personally, feel that I was discriminated against. But, this was because I was in a very sheltered university environment. And South Africa is a very formalized economy. If you are outside of the formal economy, you are in the informal sector, which is just about where 15% of the people compete. The tendency is that is where you feel the ferocity of xenophobic attacks, because my suspicion is that a lot of the formal professionals who are embedded in different formal structures don't get to feel the xenophobia as strongly as those who set up shops in the informal economy and try to function. Now, in your introduction, you said something about how these xenophobic attacks are likely a consequence of the apartheid years. I don't think so. I don't think so, because in the course of my own work, you introduced me as a consultant to Nepal. I've done quite a bit of travel across the continent. In fact, there are countries that have even far poorer economic profile, like Ethiopia. You don't get that sense of xenophobic attacks against foreigners. So my own sense, as far as South Africa is concerned, is there is a great deal of what I call historical ignorance among the population. Not among the leaders, but among the population. Let me explain what I mean. A lot of the leaders, the political, religious leaders in South Africa, recognize that Nigeria played a very pivotal role at very critical moments in their history. Thabo Mbeki, for instance, lived in South Africa, lived here in Lagos. He once lived at 1004. He had Nigerian scholarships until eventually he left from Nigeria to Russia. So a lot of these South African leaders benefited a lot, from Nigeria.
So let me just jump in here. I want to just read something that Cyril Ramaphosa said in March.
Yes.
He said, he's condemning the attacks. He said, Africa helped defeat apartheid. Countries like Uganda, countries that were not even our neighbors, gave us refuge, embraced us, and supported our struggle in more ways that you can imagine. Militarily, resource-wise, they gave our people skills, and he continued on. So this is exactly what you're saying.
Yes, and you see, but the problem is the leaders, as I said, know this.
Yes.
But how much of the common people know this? You don't find it in their history books. You don't find it, valorized in the social centers.
So do you think that it's just a case of it not being, people being misinformed, or it's not being communicated effectively? There's not
I think so, because I believe that if they knew better,
yes,
if they knew better, they know that they would have known that they owe not just Nigeria, but Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and the rest of the African continent a debt of gratitude. And so simply saying that because they are poor, they don't want foreigners to take their jobs, it doesn't really capture the complexity of the ignorance there.
Let me ask you something, because I've kind of looked at this story about these killings and was on Twitter, even though Twitter is not somewhere that I normally get information from, but reading it. Recently, there was a young man that was killed in the middle of the night in his house by the South African police that invaded his house. And there were stories surrounding it that a lot of it has to do with illegal activities, prostitution by Nigerians, and it seems to be a very, very big growing concern in general for South Africans. Well, right now that's showing that the injustice is at a rise and it's at its peak. What do you say, or how do we diffuse this situation and give the correct information in highlighting the situation of what exactly is going on?
I think that if Nigerians get involved in acts of criminality, those countries, whether it's South Africa or whether it's Ghana, they have established laws. Treat them with the same, the same way you will treat suspects. First of all, accord them the presumption of innocence. Treat them with dignity. You have laws, follow due process. There is a tendency, unfortunately, to stereotype Nigerians and then criminalize Nigerian identity. Any person who is a Nigerian is, first of all, assumed to be innocent until he proves himself assumed to be guilty until he proves himself or herself innocent. So I think that a lot of it has to do, of course, with stereotyping Nigerians. And by stereotype, I mean, some of these things are also cultural. Nigerians are very assertive. Nigerians are very venturesome. They're also not used exactly to order, to be blunt about it, because we've got a very dysfunctional system here, and there is a sense in which some of our social reflexes, sometimes reflect the kind of disorderly behavior that we are used to here in Nigeria. So when you move to more organized systems, you'll find that Nigerians are likely to be the most, yes, they are likely to be the loudest, they're likely to be the most venturesome. And if there is a way they can bypass the process, Nigerians are likely to be the ones. But, my own advocacy would be, if you have laws, follow the rules. Take them to court, prosecute them, let the rule of law prevail rather than resort to extrajudicial measures.
Now, to go back to your point about apartheid, it's not just a reference to poverty. What about the fact that they were brutalized and therefore have now become the brutalizers in turn? And also the fact that you mentioned about the lack of education. There's all kinds of deprivation that apartheid has caused. So I want to just make that point. Now, the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa, which are the continent's two superpowers, or ought to be, should be close, but actually plunged to a nadir in 2015 when Nigeria recalled our ambassador from South Africa over these killings. Do you think that we ought to have returned diplomatic relations to South Africa if they had not been stopped? Because it continues. Right now we have had almost 120 Nigerians murdered.
It's about 130. It's really
murdered in cold blood.
You're right. I don't think that the principle of reciprocity has actually been followed by successive Nigerian governments, not just this one. But that's also because, frankly, Nigerian governments tend to treat their own citizens with contempt. These are the blunt realities. And so there is very little value for Nigerian life, even here in the homeland.
Yes.
That's an excellent point.
Yes, yes, because, Nigerians are, if you like, the Americans of Africa. Yeah. We are very venturesome. We have almost superiority complex. Whether it's in the formal economy or in the informal economy, we operate and we are very adventurous. And so, when you deal with other Africans, they tend to be a little more reticent. They're a bit more withdrawn. They're a bit more submissive to dominant authority. Nigerians are not like that. And so wherever we go, there's a tendency that Nigerians are probably the loudest, they're the most venturesome, as I said. So, you know, when you have so many Nigerians behaving in this way, in a foreign land, there is a tendency for people to say, who are these guys? Why can't they stay in their country and things like that? But that's a very important thing, because I would expect that the governments or the religious leaders, political leaders will be the first to say, look, these are our brothers. They have committed no crime. If they commit crime, of course, as I said, follow the rules. But to simply stereotype Nigerians, criminalize the Nigerian identity, I think that is where the fundamental problem comes. In fact, it is going to be more problematic going forward, because now there is a continental free trade agreement that we haven't signed. We are the market. By market here, I'm referring to our size, our purchasing power. We have over 200 million people here. So this is the place that is the target of that continental trade agreement. The moment we sign it, we open our borders for all kinds of interactions to happen. So it's going to be paradoxical to have this kind of market open to the rest of Africa, while the Nigerian identity continues to be criminalized in South Africa and Malawi and Ghana and the rest of them. There is no way you can conduct continental free trade in the context of this kind of xenophobic sentiments across the continent against Nigerians.
Absolutely not.
So my question to you now is, these are the problems. In your experience, I mean, one of the biggest accusations is that Nigerians do engage in criminal behavior in these countries, South Africa, Ghana, all this. What do you say to the Nigerians that have migrated to these countries? What is our responsibilities as guests of the land?
When you go into a foreign country, you are not just traveling, you're also traveling into a completely different legal zone. You follow the rules, you obey the customs, you show respect for the people, you conduct yourself in a way that is legal. If you don't do that, as I suspect some people wouldn't do, let the law take its course. But the problem I find is there is an advanced criminalization of Nigerian identity, such that even when there is a mere suspicion, the people are already treated as guilty. In the prisons, they are the worst treated. In the streets, they are the people who are extrajudicially lynched and killed. You know, there will be criminals everywhere. I mean, we've seen all kinds of foreign nationals commit crimes here, Italians, Russians, Americans. You know, we don't prejudge, you know, foreigners, you know, simply because they're in Nigeria. Once there are specific cases of criminality, the law takes its course. But where xenophobia kicks in is when you have this almost organic fear of Nigerians. You presume as soon as you see them at the airport that they are likely targets of criminality, and you isolate them for mistreatment. That is where I think our own government and the different embassies.
We're going to go on a break. When we come back, I actually want to shift gears to talk more about Ghana and what's happening in Ghana. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still with Dr. Austin Tam-George, talking about diplomatic relations and xenophobic attacks across Africa and Nigerians at risk. So before we went on break, we were talking about sort of the fact that there are criminals in every system. There are criminals, there are people that travel and commit crimes in Nigeria, and the law takes over. You were saying that specifically your concern, and one of the things that you find disturbing are these extrajudicial sort of reactions.
Yes, and I was suggesting that any person who leaves Nigeria and goes into another country ought to recognize that behavior will be regulated by law.
Yes.
If you violate the laws of the host country, you will be treated according to the law. But the worry is, you know, we don't tend to see Nigerians being treated according to the law. Because there is this tendency to stereotype Nigerians as criminals in advance, sometimes even of their arrival. There's a tendency to treat them extrajudicially. They are the ones who are lynched on the streets. They are the ones whose businesses are ruined, even before the benefit of legal or judicial intervention. So I think that is where our embassies come in. Don't prejudge Nigerians simply because they have had contact with the law. ask specifically the circumstances for each encounter, and then insist that the law, be followed, rather than people simply closing down shops, killing Nigerians, lynching them in the streets, criminalizing them, sacking them from their jobs, even before due processes are followed. So there's a lot that the government, through the embassies, can do. And I think that the principle of reciprocity in international relations ought to kick in. If you don't respect or treat our nationals well, we will do exactly the same things to your citizens in our country. We will make it more difficult for your people to come here. But I think for this kind of thing to happen, there has to be a whole new way of conceiving citizenship in our own country itself. We need to treat our people with a lot of, respect, be accountable to them. I think what our attitude to how Nigerians are treated abroad is a reflection of our own attitude towards citizens of this country. If you don't treat your citizens with dignity and respect, you can't expect exactly the same standards from foreigners.
Charity begins at home.
It does. I wanted to
that's a very important point you make, because I have seen and read cases in which Americans have gone and committed crimes in other places. I mean, these are real crimes, and they're in these jails, either in Thailand or drug crimes, and they still have the American government working and pleading on their behalf. When you make a point like that, and the fact that, does that also give other countries sort of liberty to sort of do anything to, because they know Nigeria is not going to do anything to protect its citizens, or actually to come and represent its citizens, or do anything on behalf of its citizens?
If we go momentarily away from how foreign countries treat Nigerians, to how we even treat our own citizens in the labor sector, for instance, you'll find that state governments, sometimes the federal government, owes 2, 3, 4, 5 months of salaries to workers, but you expect multinational firms, to then pay your workers their workers promptly. You want them to obey the labor laws, which the government itself is in violation of. So if you don't treat your citizens well, there's very little moral authority you can exert when you see that your citizens are being treated very poorly in other countries, because they receive the impulse, from what they see in your own country. But all of these things can change easily. We need to make sure we have embassies that give consular support to Nigerians who are in trouble in all parts of the world. But that comes with commitment and reorientation. We need to make sure that Nigerians, wherever they are, like Russians, whatever the crime, if you are based in Russia and you are accused of even convicted of any act of criminality in another country, they do not extradite you to that country. You probably will be tried in Russia or not tried at all. So the point I'm making is we probably should rethink our foreign policy, re-engage with our African brothers, and try to make sure that they treat Nigerians with a great deal of respect, according to the rules of engagement. We are not asking for any preferential treatment for Nigerians. What we are saying is you can't be lynching our citizens in the streets like animals. You can't be burning down their businesses. You can't be killing them, for no reason in most cases. In South Africa, Nigerians have been killed, they've been beheaded, sometimes all of these things captured on live television. And to think that our own government, hardly even intervenes.
There's no response, not since 2015 when there was that one response.
And in this kind of thing, if they do not get strong response from the home government, the tendency is that this kind of thing will continue.
In the rules of relationships, you did definitely mention their trade agreements, and we need to be stronger on our foreign agreements and international laws concerning this. I want to know, when it comes to the issue of travel, we do have a culture of travel as Nigerians. South Africa has heavily promoted tourism within their country. In fact, I think in 2017, they had the highest number of Nigerians travel. I think about 100,000 Nigerians actually went into South Africa. We're spending money, we're traveling there, they're opening their doors, they're saying that come and be at peace here. But these things are happening, these killings are quite alarming. What are the informed decisions that we need to know as Nigerians, possibly people who are ready to travel? Summer is around the corner. People are looking to go to destinations. Should we be concerned? And if so, why? And what should we do?
Part of the responsibilities, I think, of the Foreign Office is to issue travel advisories. That, look, some of these places are hostile, you know, for no reason sometimes against Nigerians. So you give travel advisories. But look, I think that the more fundamental work has to be done right here at home. Nigeria is a very vast country. We have, you know, a very rich tapestry of cultural events. We have cities that we can develop to modern standards. If we have a crumbling economy, we have a dysfunctional system, people will flee, you know, even for leisure purposes. They want to have a break, and they think that the break has to be outside of the country.
That's true.
We have a very vast country that we can develop. So the challenge of national development is something we've got to rise to. The moment we're able to develop our country, very few people will have appetite, you know, to be going outside and spending money. So this is actually what we have to do. In the U.S., you could leave Detroit and move to New York. You know, sometimes you get a sense that you're moving to another country. In South Africa, they are in Africa, but they have world-class infrastructure. Sometimes if you see the landscape, simply traveling from Johannesburg to Pretoria, you get a sense that you're leaving the country. Sometimes if you're traveling by road from Johannesburg to Cape Town, it's a whole journey, and you see the landscape, you see the beauty of the cities. People hardly, South Africans are probably the least traveled across the world, you know, because, you know, sometimes they don't find, when I was based in South Africa and I had, because of my scholarship, to move to other parts of the world, I always had the feeling that, look, I want to go back to South Africa, because I couldn't see much in Europe that I couldn't find in South Africa. So the point is, we've got to develop this country to such a point where people have less and less appetite to go out. If you are based in Zamfara, for instance, you want to go on vacation in Calabar, because Calabar is developed, the people are not hostile, the place is very well developed, anything you want, you can. Sometimes we talk about Dubai. We forget that Dubai is not a country. It's just a city. It's just a city with very oversized ambition to go into, not just go into modernity, but define post-modernity itself. Why can't we have a city or two out of 36 states? What they call Emirates are what we call states. When they say United Arab Emirates, just a body of Emirates coming together. Abu Dhabi is there, Sharjah is there, Dubai is there. These are just the Emirates that come together to form the UAE. In the same way we have 36 states that form Nigeria. In the same way South Africa has 9 provinces. Why can't we develop all of these cities as centers of tourism?
Why not? Exactly.
Why not? In fact, now with the emergence of protectionism, of trade, all around the world, more and more people are looking inwards to see what they have within themselves that they can do. Look at the trade war going on between the U.S. and China. China has the largest market, 1.6 billion people. So when they produce, they look at the Chinese market first.
We're going to go to break now, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about the work that needs to be done on the home front. Stay with us. All right, we're still with Dr. Austin Tam-George talking about the growing challenge of immigration, especially people migrating to different parts of the world. We spoke a lot in length about South Africa. Tundun, I know you wanted to talk about Ghana. So
yes, I want to just paint the whole picture of what happened in Ghana and Kumasi, where Nigerian shops were shut down, and the locals there accused the Nigerian traders of selling substandard goods, of importing their practices like kidnapping to their country. So these are quite grave allegations. We don't want your salt here. Shut down their shops. Some people were attacked. And the Ghanaian police have responded quite swiftly and said, even though there's a law in place, the Ghana Imports Promotion Center Act of 2013, which prohibits any non-Ghanaian from operating in the retail sector, even though that law is in place, the police say that they welcome everybody to Ghana. It's now a global village. You can come, you can open a shop. They have reopened all the shops on Thursday. They're promising to convict those masterminds. 2 masterminds have been named that the police is going to go after them. I'd like you to contrast this response from Ghana to what we see in South Africa.
No, in South Africa until recently, actually, as recently as the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, there has been an almost official denial of xenophobic attacks. Under Zuma, for instance, they saw it as just another isolated case of criminality, and so they just followed. Sometimes you begin to suspect whether there is, a formal encouragement of this kind of thing, because when it has to do with lynching people, burning down businesses, and killing people, and there is no clear record of action taken against the perpetrators of this kind of act, it becomes a kind of tacit approval that, look, there was a time, in fact, 2 years ago, when the king of Zululand made very inflammatory
Yes, he said everybody should go to their country.
Yes. So when you see people in the traditional hierarchy that wield substantial influence over the people make those kind of open xenophobic statements, you begin to wonder whether there are formal structures within South African society that actually support these kind of things. But under Cyril Ramaphosa, we've seen a clear departure, in the way at least the matter is understood. He seems to recognize that these are xenophobic tendencies and they can only harm South Africa in the final analysis. But as I said in the last segment, we have a lot of work to do in this country. We have a very vast country with very different, capabilities across all the states. If we dare to develop infrastructure, modernize our economy, may run an inclusive economy that, gives equal opportunity to everyone, Nigerians will rather thrive in their own country more and more than simply going to take all the risks,
First of all, the treacherous journey to some of these places, even to South Africa, they're these journeys to get into these countries, if you don't have the legal paperwork, and then when you get into these countries, you're then criminalized, is really scary.
Yeah, so the work has to be done here. We need to treat our people better. And part of that is running an accountable government, making sure our economy improves. Because, look, if people have far better opportunities in their own home countries, of course, they may want to leave sometimes for leisure, but they will sooner come back to their country. We have everything here. We have everything here, if only we want to develop them. But you don't get the sense that we have both the leadership and the capacity to do these things. And so more and more Nigerians seem to follow the principle of mobility of labor to say, look, if I can't work here, why can't I work elsewhere? So you see many people leaving. And those who are suffering a lot of these attacks the most are those who end up in the informal sector, as I said. Because if you're a specialist or a professional in some sense, you go straight to the formal sector and get yourself embedded. But once you are in the informal sector, that's where survival becomes more fierce. A lot of people think that, even the little that we have, these foreigners are taking away from it. In South Africa, the typical allegation is that we are taking Nigerians are taking their women from them, taking their businesses from them, and all of that.
But then what do you say to those allegations? And that we're bringing in, even our movies have been criticized, that Nollywood movies with all the witchcraft, all the crime, that we're bringing in our corrupt culture to their country.
Well, they have census board. They have their own, regulatory agencies. So there are ways, there are formal structures of making sure. All of these things are forms of cultural trade protectionism.
Yes.
So that's the point I was making in the last segment. That look at what China is doing. In everything China does, they look at China itself as the largest market. There are 1.6 billion people. America is just over 300 million people. But I think why America wields so much influence around the world is because they have the strongest purchasing power.
Yes.
They have the most advanced technology. Their markets, are, integrated, around those of their allies. So what I think we should do is to make sure we run a very clean and accountable government, operate an inclusive economy, get people around to make sure that we have a developmental agenda. We no longer have those kind of agenda these days. In Nigeria, we used to have long, short-term, and medium-term, so that whatever party comes into office, there is a development.
So where would be, you have been a consultant, you have consulted for government, you have lived in South Africa as a teacher as well as a student. You talked about short-term, long-term. On your list of short-term for Nigeria, where would you start?
Where I will start will be to make sure that the governor, the president, for instance, forms a cabinet that includes every person that, you know, these people do not need to be party. I mean, I used to be in government. You know, I was in government in Rivers State at some point. You know, and I wasn't a party man. I wasn't in the PDP or the APC. The governor just called me to say, look, I've watched your work for quite a while. You know, come, let's build a state. You know, you ought to be able to build a
So we should be
cabinet.
looking to build.
Yes, build. You know, Nigerians in the diaspora have skills that, you know, we don't have here. Bring them down here. You don't need to worry whether they are party members. Get the best possible people, form a good team, have a development agenda, and follow it through on a step-by-step basis. That's what they're doing in Qatar. That's what they're doing in Dubai. You see all those skyscrapers, all of those high-rise buildings in Dubai. The architects are sometimes from Europe. The builders are sometimes from Italy. You know, all kinds of people. They want the very best. And then they take time to make sure they have a very elaborate mentorship scheme so that you see some of their citizens over a 30 or 40-year period, you see that, you know, they have the best possible manpower going forward. We don't have those kind of things here. In Taiwan, they don't have crude oil or any of these natural resources. They have only cyclones and earthquakes and typhoons. In fact, even sand, yes, even sand and gravels, Taiwan imports from China because they have rocky, you know, terrain all over the place. But they have the sixth most dynamic economy in the world. Why? Because they've invested massively in manpower development. So today, you'll be surprised that there are all kinds of Nigerians in Taiwan. But we don't have that kind of capacity here, you know, that kind of emphasis in human capital development. We need that. And, once we do that, you know, once we do that, Nigerians will remain. We also need leadership that collectivizes the people without discrimination and ethnic bigotry. Because once people feel that they're excluded within a system, they don't wish that system well.
I want to jump in here and ask you a question. One of the things you're saying that they're increasing, I mean, because of the challenges we have at home, increasing populations of Nigerians are migrating to different parts of the world. Asia is one of them. I mean, I was in Japan a couple of years ago. First of all, you couldn't walk down. I mean, I went to one of the big, dense areas. There was Davido playing. There was, out of all the stores, Nigerians there selling stuff on the street. One of the things, the first things I thought about when you said the diplomatic thing is that we're migrating to all different parts of the world. The one thing that this government has also said is that they're going to shut down embassies. So what type of protection can we expect Nigerians to have around the world? Especially because we already have economic crunches that is going to make it impossible for us to have representation in most of these places.
Sometimes it's not really the number of embassies you have as much as the effectiveness of those consulates.
So let's talk about the effectiveness then.
Yes, because
the numbers, the effectiveness, everything.
For instance, if you have an ambassador based in South Africa and yet this person, you know, exercises consular oversight around the entire South Africa. Which is fine so long as they do their jobs well. But now the matter is not so much about the number of ambassadors we have as much as, you know, the tendency to say, well, you know, Nigerians are always a problem anyway, wherever they go. Our own government tends to view Nigerians along the lenses of, you know, criminality and the rest of them. And
says that internationally.
Yes, and you know, and these people get those kind of impulses.
But also, too, I mean, one of the things you talked about is efficiency. 2 weeks ago, there was a huge scandal on Twitter that the Nigerian-Canadian embassy in was basically shut down day after day, that people were going there. And people were spending money to come from different parts of the country to come and pick up either passports or just paperwork, and they weren't able to do it. I lived in New York for many years. When I had to do anything at the Nigerian embassy, it was with a prayer and a connection. I always had to have a connection. So the efficiency even of the places that we do have representation.
No, but to be fair, regarding Canada, that was an old video. It just resurfaced because of that horrendous incident with the vandalism in London. So apparently the current ambassador of Canada is doing a sterling job. But so that was an old video. But that did happen.
Yes.
In all my travels, you know, when I was based in South Africa, I didn't have a single problem, you know, getting visas. If I was going to the UK, I was going to France, I was going to any of these countries. Sometimes they will tell you, just wait around and you get your visa. You know. But coming to Nigeria, there is a sense that, is this person running away? Will this person come? They want to do proper background checks. They want to know where you work. They want to know your history of receiving salaries over the past 6 months. They want to know about your grandparents. They want to know about your social media practices. So there's a sense in which, you know, the people believe that, look, this is a crumbling country and people simply want to escape using all kinds of excuses. So I think that the long-term solution has to be to build a country where everybody feels that they have a stake. This exclusionary politics, where people feel that, well, we have won the election now, so if you didn't vote for us, it's up to you. People are going to basically, lose confidence in their country, and they will risk anything to want to, live a better life. So I think the real solution lies here, not in the foreign embassies. We need to make sure we build a country that brings people together. People feel that they have equal opportunity.
Yes.
Nobody can stop any Nigerian from traveling. But the tendency is that when you travel and you know that you have even a better stake at home, you want to return. As I said, anywhere I went to, I often wanted to return to South Africa. I still want to return. Lagos.
You're not going anywhere.
Lagos is my center of gravity now. Anywhere I go, I still want to return to Nigeria. But then how many people? People simply want to
escape.
I mean, now, as I said, more and more countries, I imagine, look at Rwanda, over the past 25 years, they've turned things around. If you want to hold, Nigerian companies now hold conferences in Rwanda. Rwanda is
but I want to quickly address an issue. You're talking about the macro, the federal government's attitudes and what needs to change. What about the micro? Because the fact of the matter is that Nigerians do conduct themselves poorly all over the world. We do. Some of us conduct ourselves excellently, but some of us do conduct ourselves poorly. In Kumasi, this Ghanaian scandal happened. In the same week, a Ghanaian woman was raped in the presence of her husband by 5 Nigerian armed robbers.
Follow the rules.
So what do we do? As
follow
individuals?
Yes, follow the law. There will be criminality everywhere, but follow the law. I think that, people tend to self-regulate when they know that the consequences of misbehavior can be very high. If you live in a dysfunctional system such as ours, people wouldn't use, the restroom in their offices, but then would prefer to use, park along the road, and it's almost a cultural thing. But if you go to a system where such things are forbidden, you will fall in line. If Nigerians do not follow the laws, bring them back, to where they should be, but do not lynch them.
Yes,
and until there is conviction, let them be accorded the presumption of innocence.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back.
Not quite, but not conviction by reputation, which is what we have now. When you're a Nigerian, you're automatically guilty. A criminal. You're into cultism, into all kinds of horrors, yes.